ご紹介どうもありがとうございました。京都大学大学院医学研究科社会健康医学系専攻健康情報学分野の中山武雄と申します。でこの度グローバルヘルスケア財団と共同で第1回のメディカルヒューマニティーズのシンポジウムをさせていただくことになりました。このような機会をいただきましたこと、関係の皆様ご支援いただいた方々に心より御礼を申し上げたいと思います。で10分ほどですけれども、少し今回のシンポジウムのオーバービューをさせていただきたいと思います。ですね。で主催協、それから講演は本当に多くの団体からご講演をいただくことができました。であとまた個人的にもさまざまな方々に応援や応援のメッセージ、ご支援を賜りましたことをこの場をお借りして心より御礼申し上げたいと思います。さてでヒューマニティーズ、メディカルヒューマニティーズとで皆さんヒューマニティっていうとなんとなく分かったような気になるかと思うんですけれども、実はあんまり今メディカルの中でヒューマニティって話されているようで話されていないと。ですから私自身ももちろん専門ではありませんが、もう一回この機会に人間として医学を考える、どういうことなんだろうかということをもう一回振り返ってみたいなというふうに考えております。でこれは有名なウェブスターディクショナリーにヒューマニティってどんなことが書いてあるかということを調べてみました。でまずディフィニッションから入りましょうということなんですね。でこれを見てみると1番目ヒューマニティで実はヒューマニティとヒューマニティーズが違うってことをちょっとお話をしておきたいのですが、ヒューマニティはコンパッショネイト、シンパセティック、ジェネラス、つまり思いやりがある、共感的である、で寛容である、でこういったのは良い意味での人間らしさというのがヒューマニティですね。で2の A、The quality of a state of being human joined together by their common humanity。ですから人間として人類、人間個人だけではなくて人間としてというようなやっぱり意味合いがあるんではないかなと思います。これはヒューマニティです。で実はヒューマニティーズと複数形になるとちょっと違う意味が出てくるんですね。で下の青字のところです。The branches of learning such as philosophy, arts or languages that investigate human construct and concerns as opposed to natural processes as in physics or chemistry、 メディスン入ってないですけど、social relations as an anthropology or economics と。ですから特に我々ナチュラルサイエンスに対する人文科学として、ヒューマニティーズということを位置づける必要がまずあるかなというふうに思います。実はヒューマニティーズの中にこのソーシャルリレーションズともオポーズとなんてことが書いてあったのは正直と私は意外だったんですけれども、定義としてはこのようになっています。よろしいでしょうか。ですからヒューマニティの議論とヒューマニティーズの議論両方あるんですね。で、これを全体としてまとめると、ヒューマニティは人間であることで、人間性、人間らしさ、それから思いやり、自費心というようになりますし、ヒューマニティーズになると人文科学というような訳が広く使われています。でメディカルヒューマニティーズっていうのは何でしょうかという話になるかなと思います。でこのメディカルヒューマニティーズを考えるこのメディスンの中でヒューマニティまたはヒューマニティーズをどう考えるかというところで、ちょっとこの一つの議論の始まりとしてエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンのお話、先ほど上本先生からも少し言及ありましたけれどもご紹介をしておきたいと思います。でエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンは今医療の関係者であれば、ほとんど全ての人間が知っているもうコモンワードになったかなと思います。で1991年にゴードン・ガヤット、臨床疫学者ゴードン・ガヤットがエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンという、これは 1ページの論文なんですね。これを出しました。これなんですね。でこれは医療行為の有効性を科学的に捉え直す試みであったと言えるでしょうと。もう28年前なんですね。でしかしですね、このエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンがいろいろ誤解されながらちょっと広まっているところはあるんですが、これはエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンの有名な教科書の定義です。でEBM requires the integration of the best research evidence with clinical expertise and our patient unique values and circumstances。 実はエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンは4つの要因で構成されているんですね。これエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンってエビデンスだけでやってるっていう方が非常に多いところが誤解の一つなんですが、第一はリサーチによるちゃんとしたエビデンス、2番目がクリニカル・エキスパーティスというのは臨床家の熟練なんですね。そしてペイシャントユニークバリュー、患者さんの価値観入ってる。これからその医療が置かれる場、どんな状況でその医療が行われるかを考えろということが EBM の本来の意味ということになります。インテグレーションなんですね。ですから当然この中の一つであるペイシャンツユニークバリューズということを我々は医療をやるときにどれほどちゃんと考えられているんだろうかということが気になります。でなぜならこのエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスンという名前によってリサーチエビデンスばかりが重視されてしまってきてしまっているのが今の実情なんですね、医療の一つの。で本当にこれでいいんだろうかということを考えさせられます。でその中でですね、例えばそれに対する問い直しの一つがナラティブ・ベイズド・メディスンでした。でこの量的なデータ、量的な研究によるエビデンス、客観的なデータを重視する、一般論を重視する量的なエビデンスへの過度の注目から患者個人の内面的体験の表出、ナラティブ、物語、語りへの関心が対照的に鮮明化するのが1990年代の後半なんですね。EBM が生まれたのは1991年です。しかしエビデンスばっかりが行き過ぎてしまって、それに対する反省、本来はEBM の中に患者さんの視点入ってるんですけれども、エビデンスばっかりが重視されてしまったことへの反省の一つとして、実は1999年にこの EBM の推進者であったトリシャ・グリハン先生と、それから今日ご講演をいただくブライアン・ハーウィッツ先生がナラティブ・ベイズド・メディスンを提唱されるんですね。でこれ、今日のキーノートスピーカーでいらしていただきましたブライアン・ハーウィッツ先生の名著ナラティブ・ベイズド・メディスンですね。非常に分厚い本です。でこれは富山大学の斉藤先生を中心とするグループが翻訳もしてくださっています。でこれが約20年前の動きなんですね。ですから今日は本当にナラティブ・ベイズド・メディスンのお話の提唱されたハーウィッツ先生からメディカル・ヒューマニティーズのお話を伺える。ハーウィッツ先生は EBM エビデンス・ベイズド・メディスン定量的な研究をきちんとされた上でそのナラティブのことに進まれているんですね。ヒューマニティーズの視点を非常に大事にされている。でこれがですね、メディカル・ヒューマニティーズがどれくらい英文論文になっているかということを調べてみました。実は昨日の夜調べたんですけれども、パブメドでメディカル・ヒューマニティーズをタイトルとアブストラクトに含んでいる論文の数の傾向なんですね。で実は毎年数十ですからそんな多くはないんです。多くはないんですけれども、着実にこの10年くらいで世界的にはメディカル・ヒューマニティーズのちゃんとした論文として議論がされているんですね。では日本からどのくらいの発信があるかと、これはもう残念ながらほとんどナッシングって言ってしまったんですけど、ほとんどまだ発展途上の手前の段階です。でもう一度この EBM のところに戻ってみますと、先ほどの EBM のディフィニッション4つの要因の統合、そしてその中にはペイシャントバリューが入っているというところ、先ほどお話をしました。そして客観的なデータによるエビデンスがある意味ではちょっと過剰に重視されてしまっているという、あえて言えば弊害もお話をしました。でもう一つの EBM の定義があるんですね。これは1996年にエビデンス・ベイズド・メディスン、それからクリニカル・エピデミオロジーの推進者も有名なパイオニアの一人デビッド・サケットらのグループが出した論文ですが、1991年の EBM の発表に対して多くの方々が残念ながらそれを誤解しながら広まっていってしまった。それに対してパイオニアたちはその状況に対して EBM What it is and What it is not という論文を BMJ に発表することで EBM の誤解を解く試みをするんですね。でその時の EBM の説明がこうです。 EBM とは個々の患者のケアに関する意思決定過程に現在得られる最良の根拠カレントベストエビデンスを良心的コンシェンシャスに明示的エクスプリシットちゃんとアカウンタブルにということだと思います。それから最後の言葉がよくて私はいつも強調しているんですけれども、かつ思慮深く用いることと。でジュディシャスっていう言葉なんですね。で私ジュディシャスっていう言葉私と一番読んだ頃には自分のボキャブラリーになくて辞書で調べてみたら思慮深いっていうふうに書いてあって非常にいい言葉だなというふうに思いました。ですから私たちは本当に自分たちのやっていることが本当に思慮深くやってるんだろうか、本当にジュディシャスなんだろうかということを常に問い直す必要がある。でその時には多分今までのメディカルサイエンス、そして多くのライフサイエンス、バイオメディスンでそういった定量的なデータ、客観的なデータも大事なんだけれども、思慮を深めるためにはこういったヒューマニティ、そしてヒューマニティーズの視点が必要になってくるのではということを考えさせられます。で今日はですね、こういったようなプログラムで、シンポジウムを開催、行わさせていただきたいと思います。で私の話の後は第1部は基調講演として、ロンドン大学キングスカレッジのプロフェッサーブライアン・ハーウィッツ先生に、What are the medical humanities and why do they matter? お話をいただきます。 この時はグローバルヘルスケア財団の林恵理子先生に座長をお願いいたします。これから第2部、休憩を挟んで第2部の講演では3人の先生方にいらしていただきました。で王慶民先生はエドワーズ・ライフサイエンスの代表取締役会長、MD でこれは腎臓透析の領域で非常にイノベーティブなお仕事を展開されている企業です。でその中でのイノベーション、先端技術の取り組みとメディカルヒューマニティ、humanities の視点について一つの手がかりをいただければというふうに願っております。それから2席目は山中明子先生、ケンブリッジ大学の上級外交フェローでいらっしゃいます。元お手元の略歴をご覧になってもお分かりの通り、元衆議院もお務めになっていらっしゃいます。非常に世界的な視野で活躍されている日本の代表的なお方のお一人です。で社会の基盤としてのヒューマニティーズ、特にキーワードはソーシャルレジリエンスとコモンインタレストということをキーワードとしていただいております。ですから個々の人間ではなくて、人間社会を守るためにはどうしたらいいかという話になるのではないかなというふうに思います。それから3点目が京都大学政策のための科学ユニットの特任教授いらっしゃいますカール・ベッカー先生にいらしていただきました。カール・ベッカー先生はご存知の京都ではご存知の方も多いと思いますが、ハワイ生まれのアメリカ人でもちろんいらっしゃいますけれども、もう長く日本で活躍され、で京都大学でもまさに日本における人文科学、そしてメディカルの視点の活躍、ご業績を多く積まれ、でその教え子もたくさん育っていらっしゃいます。で今日は人文社会系が日本の医療に貢献できるのかというようななかなかエキサイティングなお話をいただくことを楽しみにしております。で最後は私が座長させていただいて、それからハーウィッツ先生にもご一緒いただいて、皆さんでディスカッションをして、まとめに入りたいというふうに思っております。でですね、最後なんですけれども、私の、ご挨拶の手元の小録集、いくつかミスプリなどもありまして、本当に大変申し訳ありませんでした。もう本当にお恥ずかしいところが多いんですけれども、ページをめくっていただきますと、1ページ目めくっていただきますと、私のご挨拶のところがあります。先端科学とメディカルヒューマニティーズと書いてあります。その最後の方から2つ目のくらいの段落をご覧になってください。で下の方にあります。で医学・医療の先端化が加速する今、私たちは人間として社会としてどのような形で生命の倫理や死生観、共同体の形を問い直し、考えを深めていく必要があるのでしょうか。歴史的には一歩先を行く欧米に学びつつ、超高齢社会の先頭にいる日本だからこそ可能となる先端科学とメディカルヒューマニティーズの統合の試みが、世界のヘルスケアのイノベーションとして未来を描く手がかりとなることを願い、ご挨拶とさせていただきます。このように述べました。大体全体のオーバービューをさせていただきました。で皆さんと非常に実りのある時間を過ごせることを信じております。それじゃあ今日はどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
中山先生、ありがとうございました。第1部基調講演に移ります。まず座長林恵理子先生が登壇されます。グローバルヘルスケア財団の評議員でありまして、林恵理子先生のご紹介は小録集の5ページ目に載っております。ご覧ください。では。
All participants, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to this session. I am Eriko Hayashi, who is the chairperson of this session, belong to the Foundation for Global Healthcare. So I have very bad eyes, so everybody, thank you very much for your cooperation. All right, so let me introduce you, Professor Brian Hurwits. He is great. So look at your proceeding, page 7. You can find his vitae and his academic experiences there. So he is a professor for Medicine and the Art, English Department, King's College, London. And also co-director of Center for Humanities and Health, King's College, London. And also, he is visionary leader, King's College, London. He's great. So, and also today, his topic, I would like to introduce his topic. What are the medical humanities? What are the medical humanities? And why do they matter? All right. Professor Brian Hurwits, everybody clap your hand. Thank you for coming today. Yes, all right. Would you start? Thank you.
We've been in Japan for 2 weeks. We've had a wonderful time, and this is the apex, this is the apogee, the culmination of our experience here. So we're really thrilled and very grateful to the Foundation for sponsoring this trip, particularly for the work that Eriko Hayashi has put into the planning of this trip, which has been going on for several months, and also for the University of Kyoto, particularly the School of Public Health, for hosting this, and for Takeo Nakayama, who we've just heard from, for specifically hosting it. The topic, the title of my talk actually has one extra word in it. What are the medical humanities, and why do they matter today? I want to examine the origins of the field, the academic field, to characterize it and to address its origins, to historicize it, and to place it in its global context. And in a sense, you've already had a hint of that from Takeo Nakayami's graph of the appearance of the term medical humanities in PubMed, although that's, of course, a very crude measure of profile. One thing to bear in mind is that it's not only in publications that the term appears, it's also in courses. These are minors and majors in liberal arts, important liberal arts colleges in the United States, and you can see that from the year 2000, the number of these courses has actually quadrupled up till today. But there are also signs, actually, of the medical humanities having some profile in Japan, and this is a survey of the medical curricula starting in 1988 across 1996 in university medical schools in Japan, published in 88, I think, or soon after. 96, sorry. Here is a paper looking at the origins of the notion of medical humanities. Again, fairly recent, 2015. And this interesting comparison between medical humanities curricula in Japan and also in Shanghai. Interestingly, the author is actually from the University of Tokyo, but also from the different medical schools in Japan, and also a joint appointment at Shanghai. Just remember this particular phraseology, promoting the integration of medical scientific spirit and medical humanistic spirit. I'm going to come back to that. This was in a Japanese publication in 2017. But there's more evidence of interest in Japan. I hear from Professor Baker that other medical schools in Japan, including Kyoto, are interested in this field. And we've had a number of scholars and medics from Japan come to London. One is in the audience, a Japanese surgeon who took our master's course in medical humanities a number of years ago. And we've had professors of medicine come to London to give papers on aspects of the medical humanities, particularly the interest of the medical humanities in narrative analysis in medicine. There's interest in this field that goes beyond the developed world. This is a call for research fellowships in the medical humanities in India, Brazil, and South Africa just from last year. Notice the institutions that are sponsoring these fellowships: Ivy League institutions in the United States, the Wellcome Foundation in London, and other organizations. So it's a term and it's a field that's gaining growing interest across a very wide terrain. To begin with, I'd like to draw your attention to a short paragraph from an EBM group of physicians, not quoted by Takeo Nakayama, as we heard earlier. And the quote goes like this: "Knowing the tools of evidence-based practice is necessary but not sufficient for delivering the highest quality care, patient care. In addition to clinical expertise, the clinician requires compassion, sensitive listening skills, and broad perspectives from the humanities." Quite what these authors meant by the phrase "and the broad perspectives from the humanities," they have never subsequently elaborated. And I've set out in the paper, which has been translated into Japanese, a number of possible interpretations of this claim, and I'm hopeful that by the end of this talk, you will see that none of them quite encompass the full meaning of the claim. But hold on to this valorization of the humanities in medicine by the high priests of evidence-based medicine, whilst I take you through the origins of how this field has come about. Because the medical humanities is not new. We may think of it as new. The term was actually coined in 1948 by a Belgian chemist and mathematician who had emigrated to Boston in the United States at the turn of the century, George Sarton, who became actually the first professor of the history of science at Harvard University, but at this stage had founded a journal called ISIS, which is a journal devoted to the history of science, technology, and medicine, really the history of the sciences within civilization at the turn of the century. This is a journal that, of course, is still going. It's a very prestigious University of Chicago Press publication. And it also is sponsored by the History of Science Society of the United States. In 1924, George Sarton published an article entitled "The New Humanism." He was actually only one of several voices calling at that time for a new humanism, in face actually of the splintering of scientific disciplines and subdisciplines. He was very aware that some scientists couldn't speak to other scientists even within the same subject matter. Such was the specialization and the narrowing of research fields. And he wanted to generate a sense in which the sciences could understand where they sat in the history of thought and the developing sense of scientific progress at that time. Sarton believed that there were two primordial routes to human understanding: the study of nature and the study of history. And of these two, he said that the study of history was the more important discipline, because only history offered the interpretative framework required to understand science fully. Because however much insight scientists may gain into the workings of the universe and the human body, they would lack the understanding of how their concepts had arisen, the turns and twists of its development, what had promoted them, what had hindered them, how much luck and chance was involved, how much serendipity, what sorts of hypotheses proved fruitful, which ones were set aside, and the conceptual worlds that are discarded as science progresses. So, in other words, what Sarton is saying is that science itself doesn't generate a rich sense of its own lineage. It doesn't necessarily understand the false paths, the mistaken paths that were taken, how provisional scientific understanding and knowledge is, how scientific theories become superseded and discarded. This endeavor, actually, Sarton called it the new humanism, but he also said that this was a philosophy that was justified by what he called the humanization of science. And what he meant by the humanization of science was putting science in its full human context, a combination of the scientific and the humanistic spirit. So this is published in 1924, and look at the same terminology being used in a Japanese publication about this field, promoting the integration of the medical scientific spirit and the medical humanistic spirit. These authors actually don't quote Sarton, but it's quite striking how his formulation is appearing almost 100 years later. The humanization of science sought to understand science as an expression of human characteristics and capabilities: curiosity, imagination, interrogation, experimentation, which history, literature, and philosophy help to situate and comprehend. In modern terms, actually, the way we would think of this, and Professor Nakayama alluded to this at the beginning, is actually to understand that the humanities, like the sciences, are a diverse plurality. But behind the humanities lies the notion, the singularity of the human. And as Takeo Nakayama indicated, what we have here are a lot of connotations, different terms in English, which connote aspects of the humane, of humanity, of humanism, and of humanitarianism, which the humanities are interested in studying. Sarton's ideas were actually paralleled at this time by concerns of physicians, particularly those of Theodor Puschmann, professor of the history of science in Vienna, and William Osler, who came over from Johns Hopkins to Oxford at the end of the 19th century in the 1890s. Osler, of course, had founded the History of Medicine Club at Johns Hopkins Medical School, and he, together with Harvey Cushing, who actually became his biographer, the neurosurgeon, believed that the collection of books and the analysis of the history and the philosophy of medicine across many cultures and many civilizations and many periods required the collection of huge repositories of manuscripts, of scrolls, of medieval illuminations, as well as of modern papers. And this was what led to the creation of these vast libraries, particularly in the United States, what Osler and Cushing later referred to as laboratories of the humanities. So when Sarton coined the term medical humanities in a short book review published in the journal he founded, ISIS, in 1948, so after the Second World War, he meant by it a scholarly endeavor that could situate the sciences, including medicine, their discoveries, inventions, and their contributions in a multidisciplinary framework. Perhaps I've just run ahead of myself a little bit, but Osler coined this extraordinary phrase in 1919, saying that the humanities were actually the hormones that activated thinking and understanding complex societies, and that they were tremendous sources of innovation, of thinking against the grain, thinking against orthodoxy. So when, as I say, Sarton coined this term, the medical humanities, in a huge bibliography which he compiled, running to something like 100 pages in the Journal of ISIS, which he published on a 2 or 3 yearly basis. He coined it like this. He said he's actually doing, it's a very short book review. I have read this book with deep interest. It is clear that the author trained as a physician. In fact, he was a professor of surgery at the University of Chicago, and he had a strong historical and philological instinct. His death at the early age of 48 is a sad blow to the medical humanities, for very much could have been expected from him. The book is of special value because it combines medical experience with philological insight. And the book in question is actually a history, a philological history of scientific English, with particular interest in the growth in the mid-20th century of biomedical terminology. Now, the medical humanities has since grown into a huge scholarly configuration and a meeting ground for disciplines, including the history and philosophy of medicine, literature and medicine, medical ethics and law, and combinations of these. In my own institution at King's College in London, we have this Centre for the Humanities and Health, and it's situated in the English department. And its courses, for example, include the history and evolution of clinical case reports from across the world, the role of 19th century French novels in exploring medical practices, medical ethics, relationships, and professionalism, the place of delusions, dreams, and compulsions in 20th century philosophy of mind and literature, the philosophy of medical methods and their scientific status. And we've had a mix of students and physicians, humanities and medical, coming on the degree, including a professor of psychiatry from the Mayo Clinic, who is now head of Mayo's Medical School Medical Humanities program, and a senior lecturer from the University of Calgary in neurology. We've also had consultant neurologists and nephrologists from Brazil, and as I say, a Japanese surgeon too. We've also had Japanese visitors sitting in on our courses, particularly interested in literature and medicine and narrative. These are just a very quick selection of some of the seminars that we've run in the last year or so. But just to give you a feel for how these kinds of things appear in other universities, this is the program last year at Harvard in medical humanities. Not only for medical students, for other students too. But so a course on storytelling by Arthur Kleinman and David Jones. Kleinman, the anthropologist and psychiatrist at Harvard, Jones, the professor of science and culture at Harvard. A course on literature and medicine. A course on literature of affliction in Greek culture. David Elmer, professor of Greek thought at Harvard. Jean Komarov, a very distinguished anthropologist, social commentator at Harvard, African and African American studies with medical culture. And the freshman seminar run by Jerome Grootman, the oncologist. Now, the point is that the health humanities, I hope I'm giving you the sense that health humanities is lots of things. It's very unspecific. It's an umbrella term. It's actually quite a porous term. Lots of things can fit in it, and it's not at all clear what really belongs there and what doesn't belong there yet. But it's a very young field. Notice I don't call it a discipline. It's a young field. It's a young configuration, a place of conversation. And it's not only a professional place of conversation. There is plenty of room, not only for humanities scholarship, but for patient contribution, health carer voices. Humanities are, of course, interested in concepts, processes, and artifacts, as we heard earlier. their significance, meaning, lineage, production, authorship, in how what is produced becomes known, whether as text, data, dance, sculpture, musical scores. Humanities authors, artists, and scholars question, they critique as well as celebrate what it is that they study, which may not be entirely separable from the objects that they create. And one of the differences between the humanities and the sciences is that the sense of subject and object in arts and humanities to an extent interpenetrate each other in a way that the sciences try to separate. Humanities often espouse outsider positions, and certainly Jean Komaroff is famous for her outsider positions and for thinking against the grain. And for example, her interest in feminism and post-colonial theory in its relationship with medicine, medicine of race, medicine of class, medicine of gender. The role of critique, writes Rita Felsky, is not to castigate, but rather to complicate, not to engage in the destruction of ideas, but to expose their cultural construction and role. It is to get behind an object of interest or an idea to bring to light new positions and interpretations that supersede or counter previous readings. I'm going to show you some examples of what I take to be good medical humanities research and try and tell you why I think they're good humanities research. And the first example comes from the Hearing the Voice project in the University of Durham in the north of England. It's hearing a voice in the absence of any speaker is one of the most unusual, complex, and mysterious aspects of human experience. The Hearing the Voice project is aimed at developing a much better understanding of this experience in the absence of any external stimuli. These experiences are common, are much commoner than was previously thought, and have not always been seen as pathological. In fact, their pathologization is really a 19th and 20th century phenomenon. They're richly described across cultures and historical eras in memoirs, letters, and literary accounts. Can such experiences from the past, their content and diversity, be compared with voices that people hear today? What are the important tropes within which voice hearings are recounted? Are the subtypes of voices heard today different or similar to those that were heard in the past? How does hearing voices change one's being in the world in relation to, for example, one's sense of self, belief in one's own agency, inner direction, and relationship with others? This research is being undertaken not only with clinicians, but also with modern-day hearing voices groups across several continents and cultures. And it addresses the implications of its findings for the neural foundations of language. So the main principal investigators are from literature, psychology, and ethnography. And I'm going to show you some of their publications in a minute. They have implications for what's called the unity of the self, the sense in which the self can become fragmented, whereas so frequently we feel that we are a unified creature. Some of their findings have been published in The Lancet and in major journals of cognition, which I'll come to in a moment. From the revelatory and inspiratory voices of medieval mystics to those of imaginary friends in childhood, and from the inner voices of writers as they craft their characters, to the accounts people give of the international hearing voices movement, the project explores the complexity and the diversity of the experiences and interpretation of voice hearing. And they have found 4 special characteristics of these voices. One is their dialogicality. The voice is often in dialogue with the person or with others. They have an evaluative and motivational content. That's to say, they're often quite moralistic, but they're also telling the person what to do. And they're often in dialogue with other voices. and not necessarily the person's own voice as they're experiencing it. The assumption that voice hearing is inevitably a feature of psychiatric disorders is changing. Voice hearing can be a feature, as I'm sure many people know, of grief, spiritual insight, and voluntarily dissociated states such as meditation. It may follow traumatic events, disrupted processes of memory, abusive experiences, prolonged stress, or sensory deprivation. Voices often arise out of conditions of anxiety and hypervigilance, out of rumination, obsessive thinking. During transitional life experiences, the inner dialogue orientating the self can break up into punitive, confronting, and conciliatory voices, so comforting as well as confrontational. If voice hearing arises in many modes and dimensions, then examination of these different experiences enhances our understanding of them. Some novelists have discussed the sense in which fictional worlds are built out of voices which generate characters, intentionality, and agency. As Pat Waugh, one of the literary scholars, says in a paper in The Lancet, quote, "In building the disembodied vocal command or commentary into a character, the novelist takes control of the processes of inner speech," unquote. Well, what's Health Humanities about this work? Well, it's historical, but also to some extent trans-historical and trans-cultural. It offers a constructive critique of the narrowness of previous researches into voice hearing and its transdisciplinary, better still, its multidisciplinary nature involves a wide patient involvement from far-flung parts of the globe, and input from psychology, literary and historical scholars, as well as qualitative and cognitive neuroscience researchers. So it's a multifaceted, action-orientated research project. And it's resulted in impressive publications. So just to give you a sense of this, there are pages and pages of this. This is one page I've selected. But it gives you a sense here. So for example, Fernio is a distinguished psychologist at Durham. And you see that, for example, they're publishing in PLOS One on the one hand, Cortex, Fernio on the other, but also in humanities journals such as the Chaucer Review. Chaucer was a 14th and 15th century English poet who wrote some wonderful verses, not least about how he didn't have much respect for doctors at the time. But Saunders is publishing with Fernio, for example, in The Psychologist. And this is the thing that's striking about this, that we find literary scholars publishing in high-impact journals in their own domains with scientists and vice versa. So that's one example, a multidisciplinary example. Let me give you another example, which has got more of a humanities feel of what I take to be a good piece of work. The Story of Pain is the outcome of a Wellcome Trust-funded project at Birkbeck College in the University of London, very close to my own institution. And it's a study of pain from 1760 to the present through a reading of letters, memoirs, poems, prayers, songs, stories, images, textbooks, philosophical and scientific investigations, and musical scores. It therefore considers a profusion of testimonies expressive of pain and discomfort, bodily and mental, and develops a historical account deeply informed by the language and the conceptual resources in which pain has been endured, articulated, and comprehended. The effect of weaponry on human tissue has long been a productive trope for metaphors of pain. Red-hot pincers, tearing and twisting, cutting, exploding, and searing. Descriptions such as burning, scorching, and crushing in the early 19th century were joined by violations such as being chewed from inside, whereas in an earlier period, humoral processes coming from the Greek notion of humors predominated, which elucidated pain as flows that were blocked or stagnant, choked up. In a rural society, pain could be likened to garlic with roots moving around. Headaches as sheet or forked lightning, a quite different vocabulary being adopted here in Japan, she found, which included terms such as woodpecker headache, like the pounding of bark by the bird, and musk deer headache, like the galloping of running deer. I don't know whether these are still terms that are used by Japanese patients from rural communities today, but they were being used in the pre-industrial 18th and 19th century. Shivering and fever are not part of these sorts of Japanese headaches, she says, but they required further animal metaphors to bring in notions of fever, such as the octopus sucking and the crab headache with its pincer sensations. Burke makes apparent the extraordinary variety of figures of speech recruited to conjure up and share painful experiences. During industrialization, pain was likened to mechanical disruption, rust around nerves and defective ball bearings. And when the railway arrived, pain started to be viewed as a signal that heralded a coming danger. Burke's thesis is that figurative language discloses our being in the world. It helps familiarize the alienation and the social estrangement which pain causes by condensing experience of it in culturally understood terms. And I would just add, the thing about the symptomatic realm is that so much of it is deeply private, but it isn't so private that it's outside of culture. And whatever we say about pain, we might want to say about nausea, or we might want to say about the sense of feeling unsteady. There are many sensations that patients talk about, which they couldn't talk about at all without a sophisticated cultural vocabulary. And that cultural vocabulary has a history and evolution which the humanities are interested in. In India, the pain of cancer has been likened to that of a scorpion continuously stinging, the sting of 1,000 cobras. Her work shows just how the physiological body becomes an active repository of social and cultural meaning, and how language use in relation to pain has varied by class, by religious affiliation, not only by period. During her period of study, 1760 to today, it has shifted from positioning pain as a punishment for sin, particularly in the West, to it being a guide to virtuous behavior, a guide that's got a kind of slightly punitive quality to it, and more recently to being a stimulus to personal development and social solidarity. People with the same pain club together. They represent their pain. People with chronic pain represent their pain to government. They demand better facilities, chronic care, chronic pain clinics. And it's important to see that this symptomatic realm is not merely private, it's deeply social, it's actually quite political too. Medical humanities is not, as I said, a discipline with a defining method. Rather, it's a pluralistic, polymorphous, collaborative field of activity. And a few days ago in Tokyo, we had a mini symposium in preparation for this conference, and we heard from very many people coming from the question of what are the humanities and what's their role in medicine, with voices outside of medicine, outside of technical expertise, from agriculture, from immunology, from a whole variety of different quarters. And I welcome that diversity. I think it's very important that this field recognizes that the interest is not only in specialist professional questions, and I think I'll come to show that in a minute. The Faculty of Arts and Humanities at King's, where I work in London, extols the subjects for helping people to learn to think, to argue, and to express themselves, to evaluate experience and emotion, to understand other times and other places as well as our own, to care about strangeness, to care about the unfamiliar, to appreciate that aspects of understanding are dependent on viewpoint. The humanities offer access to systems of belief and platforms seeking to reposition the notion of patienthood, patient experiences, cultures, and perspectives as far more central a subject of inquiry than hitherto it has been. And in this, disability studies has led the way, creating a depth of analysis of socially contrived lack of agency for people in disabled groups. And medical humanities scholars are beginning to contribute to a growing public culture which finds expressions in a whole variety of quarters outside of medicine. And it's very important to appreciate this. It's in writings, it's in novels, it's in memoirs, it's in diaries. It's undertaken in enactments, it's undertaken in demonstrations. It's undertaken by patients, patient groups, carers, counsellors, poets, playwrights, novelists, visual and performance artists who are creating this new conversation about health and dis-ease. It's a conversation taking place in many media. Letters, as I've said, book-length biographies, fiction, poetry, political manifestations, film, theatre, newspaper columns, television, radio dramas, social media, patient fora, patients like me groups in the United States, patients who are involved in the invention and the refinement of certain kinds of technical procedures in medicine which they feel have not been up to scratch. There are a whole group of societies interested in patient contribution to invention within medicine. The conversation concerns illness experience, its stigmas, personal and cultural denials, carers, relationships with healthcare personnel, and the power of medical institutions and medical hierarchies. It's a conversation that shares reflective self-intimacies, what I'm suffering from, how my doctor or nurse treated me, aimed at making new sense of healthcare experiences and healthcare divides, divides between illness and disease, bodies in culture and bodies in clinics, between mental and physical conditions, expert and lay bodies, cared for and caring for bodies, scientific and humanistic. These conversations have created and are creating what we call in the West a cultural imaginary that is expressing and enacting a heightened public awareness that the experience, meaning, and human significance of illness, to quote a distinguished gerontologist in the UK, is simply not science-shaped. It's culturally shaped, it's linguistically shaped, it's historically shaped. It is not grounded in the discourse of bioscience. For discussing illness, the demand is for different terms of reference from those of objectified body parts and universal disorders, terms better able to accommodate and recognize people caught up in locally situated networks, affiliation, language, and impaired agency. In the West, these conversations are about heightened vulnerability from many possible causes. For example, in Japan, there's a well-developed culture concerning aging, which does not match bioscientific concepts, and which has its own expressive modes, revolving around positive aspects, such as pakuri, kanreki, keinohi, inkyo. I hope some of that makes some sense, as well as negative images, such as yamauba and ubasute. Sawaka Ariyoshi's work, right the way back in 1972, is often held to inaugurate this field of understanding and interest in Japan. Remember, this was a novel. Many people think it's a kind of memoir, a kind of biography. It isn't. It's a piece of fiction. And it's important to understand the role of fiction in helping to work out and work through issues that are often seen as purely medical and health related. They aren't. They are pervasively cultural. A cultural space expressing aspirations which are much more emancipatory is beginning to involve healthcare, which it's the role of the medical humanities not only to study, but actually to promote. The medical humanities is particularly interested and involved not only in those who are directly affected by illness or old age, but of course by those who are not yet ill and not yet old. And so you can see that there is a dialogue going on at a much broader area, much broader level than simply the one-to-one single doctor-patient relationship. And it's not at all clear how this dialogue, which is culturally powerful and embedded, is going to interact meaningfully with the discourse of bioscience and its statistical understandings of disease. It is not at all clear how that is going to work. For example, Devon Stahl, in a very interesting memoir, actually, called Imaging and Imagining Illness, says that when she saw her own MRI scan of her central nervous system, which showed the appearances of multiple sclerosis, she confessed that she could not decide what was worse, becoming the subject of this disease or becoming subjugated to medicine's cold culture of abstraction and objectification, unquote. And she is professor of bioethics, or was professor of bioethics at Michigan State University. She's now at Baylor. This is her actually on the right, and that's her sister supporting her. So we should recall another terrain from which conversations about the medical humanities arise that came into view actually in the second half of the 19th century in the United States and the United Kingdom at about the time William Osler was active in debates about reform of medical education, in dialogue with German science, but also with the UK. And in light of the fading value of the humanities that the humanities were being accorded in the practice of medicine and in medical education, key notions of that debate in fact surfaced a century earlier in the 18th century discussions about the role of sympathy, the humane, humanity, and humanism in attempts to develop medical ethics grounded in the theories of philosophers like David Hume. And it's quite interesting that when you look at 18th century moral philosophy, what you find is actually not a great interest in medical ethics. There's a much greater interest in social ethics. And sympathy was conceived of by these thinkers as an interpersonal force, linking individuals together and promoting moral and social cohesion in the face of fragmenting effects of the development of capitalism at that time. In his lectures on the duties and qualifications of physicians in 1772, the Edinburgh physician John Gregory extolled nervous powers and dispositions of sensibility as the chief characteristics required for the practice of medicine. He wrote, "The chief quality of the physician is humanity," as we were hearing earlier. The sensibility of heart that makes us feel for the distress of other fellow creatures and which, in consequence, incites us to relieve them. Sympathy produces an anxious attention, I'm continuing the quote, an anxious attention to 1,000 little circumstances that may tend to relieve the patient, an attention which money can never purchase. Physicians require to be knowledgeable and to show especially active benevolence, love of all mankind. I mean, it's a strange idea that you should love all mankind. We see it as very abstract, but it seemed like a very important impulse at this time. In David Hume's philosophy, sensibility was the faculty by which the passions and sentiments of others become our own. And Adam Smith, in the Theory of Moral Sentiments, writes, "How selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others. Of this kind is pity or compassion." Notice how these terms which we think of as medical are actually located in the social fabric. They're not developed first within medicine. Now, this terrain of sympathy is certainly not what George Sarton was promoting when he coined the term medical humanities. So there's a tension between this version of medical humanities and the original version as he coined it. It's frequently claimed by medical educators and humanists to be the main grounds and the purposes of medical humanities, especially at a medical school setting. We recall the EBM physicians I quoted at the start of this talk, who seem to accept that scientific knowledge alone is not sufficient for providing good medical care. Powers and capacities conceived as lying outside of science, experience, intuition, capacities to imagine other lives, bodies and minds are crucial too. And these can be nourished and encouraged by studying and reflecting on materials traditionally situated in the arts and humanities, such as memoirs, poetry, and patient experience. I believe, of course, that they can also be stimulated by looking at medical writings. I'm going to show you one now, as I come to the end of this talk, by Archie Cochrane, a clinical case that he only published actually posthumously after he had died. It actually concerns a German prisoner of war camp. He was the only physician to 1,000 prisoners of war in Saxony in Germany in 1943. And this is his case. The Germans dumped a young Soviet prisoner in my ward late one night. The ward was full, so I put him in my room as he was moribund and screaming, and as I did not want to wake the ward. I examined him. He had an obvious cavitation and severe pleural rub. I thought the latter was the cause of the pain and the screaming. I had no morphia, just aspirin, which had no effect. I felt desperate. I felt very little. I knew very little Russian then, and there was no one in the ward who did. I finally, instinctively, sat down on the bed and took him in my arms. And the screaming stopped almost at once. He died peacefully in my arms a few hours later. It was not the pleurisy that caused the screaming, but loneliness. It was a wonderful education about the care of the dying. Cochrane later wrote up his experiences in prisoner of war camps in Germany, specifically in relationship to TB. And this is the other thing that he puts at the very end, actually. I was ashamed of my misdiagnosis, and I kept the story secret. He turned it, to use a Greek phrase, he turned it literally into anecdota. He turned it into a secret history, which was never published in his lifetime. And it's quite interesting to see the hostility towards anecdotes in the context, hostility towards anecdotes by EBM in the context of this particular anecdote. He later wrote up his experiences of treating people with TB in the war in a very extended paper in the BMJ, about 15 pages. But this case is not featured. But look at the way in which his feelings, his own feelings, emerge from the case. I put him in my room. I did not want to wake him. There's a lot of I presence. But there's also, I finally instinctively sat him down and took him in my arms. I was ashamed. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of feeling in this text. These are the kinds of texts that also are useful and helpful in analyzing, rigorously analyzing, using the lenses of textual analysis of the humanities or the medical humanities. And the final text I thought I'd leave you with is this interesting one by a Japanese neurologist in The Lancet, which had a whole series of columns on the uses of error, where he talks about, I once ran away from a patient. She was the mother of one of my best friends. I was in vain desperately seeking a diagnosis other than Louis Gary's disease. I felt myself to be just a sympathetic middle-aged man, really unfit to be a what's so interesting about the medical humanities is this is not, the point about a text such as this is not to see this simply in a narrow medical ethical framework. It's not an issue of what is the right thing to do. Not only that, it's not an issue just of what might be termed professionalism. There's actually an issue here of identity. This man, who's an experienced neurologist, is beginning to question his own identity. It's not only patients who question their identity when they're ill. Medical situations can force doctors and nurses to question their own identity. And this is absolutely central terrain of the medical humanities. So, to conclude, I believe that the medical humanities is the best chance we have at the current time for helping to create a culture of care, both of patients and professionals, a culture that takes account of individuality, personal needs and experiences of each. In the health humanities, the sick person is much more likely to be the hero of illness than in biomedicine, where the doctor is the hero. And perhaps in Kyoto University, I should say the scientific doctor is the hero. But either way, what I hope to have shown is that medical humanities arises from the epistemological task of making sense of scientific knowledge with the best tools available within the humanities, through careful attention to history, language, and a thorough and sustained interest in voice, viewpoint, plot, metaphors, and figures of speech in illness. This is what I take the evidence-based medicine physicians to have meant when they said that clinicians require broad perspectives from the humanities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Brian Hurwits, so wonderful special lecture today. So I would like to ask you a question. So in the presentation, you told us you believe in the medical humanities. It's the best chance for helping to create a culture of care. So it's a very interesting phrase. So could you tell me about it in more detail?
Well, what I tried to set out in my talk was that there is a very pervasive conversation going on outside of medical institutions in many Western societies, and I think also in Japan, particularly in the area of aging, around issues of experience in relationship to aging or illness or healthcare, and that this it amounts to a cultural network, especially in the case of patient groups and patient organizations, and that it's not at all clear how that conversation is going to be responded to in strictly narrow bioscientific terms, in EBM terms, for example. I think the medical humanities is a bridging, we're a long way from creating a real, genuine dialogue. But I think that it's one of the paths that we might be able to take, and it's partly because the medical humanities is really deeply interested in language of science, language of data, language of personal experience, language of fiction, visual language, the language of enactment, of drama, the ways in which human beings find modes of expressing their experience. It may be relationships within a lab. There's a huge literature on the culture of laboratories, which, again, is not really featured in medical education. It's assumed that medical education will just find a way of making of making contact and communicating. But what I think we're seeing in a lot of Western Europe and the United States, and also in China, are patients and carers getting more and more fed up, actually, with the kinds of ways in which they feel objectified and reduced to biological processes that are not resonant, that are not redolent of their own culture and experience. And I think that's a big problem for medicine at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. ただいま質問を申し上げましたのは、先生がレクチャーの中で、メディカルヒューマニティーズというものが私たちにとって新しいケアの文化とおっしゃってますけれど、カルチャー・オブ・ケアとおっしゃってますけれど、その文化ですね、ケアの文化というものを創造する、作り出すということですが、作り出すということの助けになるんだと、この非常に大きなチャンスなんだとおっしゃっておられましたので、そのことについて質問を申し上げたところです。Okay, so we have very few minutes left in this session. So do you have any comments or question? Yes. 何か質問を、ハウィッツ先生にお持ちの方いらっしゃいますか？コメントでも結構ですけれども。So okay, all right, wonderful. Give us your name and working place firstly, please. In English, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for a great and inspiration lecture, Dr. Hurwits. I'm a Manasoshi PGY2 medical doctor in Nagoya, and I was very impressed by your lecture. But I want to ask one question about why do we need to put the term medical in front of humanities? While tackling the medical problems and issues with the insight of humanities, I think where is the difference between humanities themselves and medical humanities? And as a very young doctor, it looks like a little bit arrogance of medicine to humanities to try to put medical in front of humanities.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's deeply unpopular in humanities faculties. They don't think that the medical humanities adds anything to the humanities. And it's rather like there's a debate about this, goes way outside medical humanities. It's the same in ethics. Medical ethics is considered by philosophers a very low-grade activity compared with philosophical ethical analysis or moral theory. And medical anthropology is not necessarily seen by anthropologists as an elevated field. It's often, again, seen as relatively lower grade. And in fact, in my own institution, you might have noticed that we called our centre the Centre for the Humanities and Health, not the Centre for Medical Humanities. So medical humanities is a deeply problematic term. Medical humanities sounds like one thing, and it's medical. Actually, it's not one thing, it's many. And it's as old as medicine, and it has a separate lineage of development. So I couldn't agree more with you. People have tried to get around this a little bit by talking about the health humanities that people feel is sort of slightly less tainted than the medical humanities. I think that we're probably stuck with the term as it was coined in 1948 by George Sarton, but we just use it knowing that it's a problematic term. It's rather like saying, thinking of bioscience as somehow one thing. It isn't, it's multiple things. And it doesn't necessarily add anything very much to bioscience to say, bioscience separate from biological sciences, is it separate from cell sciences, is it, it's an umbrella term. I agree with you.
Thank you. How about using humanities for health or medicine instead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I agree with you.
Okay. All right. So one more question. It's limited, so all participants? No? Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Brian Hurwits. Thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful special lecture today. 皆さんもう一度大きな拍手を先生にお願いいたします。